has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Okay, so we've got a number of participants here this evening, as well as members of council. I'd like to welcome everyone to this budget meeting. And as it's been described in years past, obviously the town budget is one of the most important decisions that council will make. Frankly, staff do the vast majority of the heavy lifting on this and preparing the budget, responding to council's feedback, responding to public feedback and redrafting the budget as we move forward. So we held our first town council meeting of the budget already. Tonight's meeting will give us an opportunity to hear from the public, both through those who have registered and those who have not. So those of you who did not pre-register with questions or to participate, if you are watching from Facebook, or if you can watch from Facebook and use that feature, if you add questions through the comments, staff will be watching that to ensure that we are able to provide questions for your answers to your questions. For those of you who have registered and are present on the Zoom, please use the chat feature or raise your hand with your icon, and we'll have an opportunity to hopefully answer your questions as well. So we're excited to have this opportunity to connect with the public, to explain to you what the budget means, some of the key features for next year, and just to provide a little bit of context. The last year's budget was just under $18 million. The town required about $15,400,000 of taxation to balance that budget. And key to that, I guess, certain things as an example, our police services last year was $4.9, almost $5 million at a cost of about $1,131 per household, or $566 per person. Of course, we also provide fire services for our community at a cost of $1,078,000, or about $123 per person. Many people may not be aware, we also pay for our shared services with the county, which includes the ambulance, ODSB, OW, Lanark Lodge, and social housing. That element of our budget, along with the health unit allocation, is just over $2.5 million, or $573 per household, or $286 per person. Of course, we also provide community services in the library, our child development center, our Heritage House Museum. Those elements all total over $2.1 million as well. And while our water and wastewater treatment facilities are supported largely by user fees, they're also supplemented by taxes, and to the tune of $661,000. So that works out to about $151 a household of taxation revenue, which is utilized to mitigate any increase in water or wastewater rates. Of course, we collect your garbage and recycling. That costs the municipality $812,000 a year, or about $185 per household. So there's a lot of elements to the budget. And so tonight we have an opportunity to go through that and again, provide some insight to the community, as well as to provide an opportunity for some feedback. So at this stage, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our treasurer, Janet Gozil, for the budget presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Panko. So just if I could take a moment, I'm just going to open up a PowerPoint presentation. It's at a high level, just to kind of go through the process to prepare for the budget and where we're at in the process. So just one moment. So as Mayor Panko indicated, this is indeed, the annual budget is one of the most important municipal policy documents. It serves to identify priorities for the year and provides the financial resources to deliver. The preliminary budget, which is based on estimates, has been prepared and reflects the vision within the strategic plan, which covers 2019 to 2022, focusing upon its core values as it relates to service delivery, while simultaneously looking forward and preparing to meet the challenges of the town and going forward. One thing to note, change in capital budget philosophy. We are slowly investing in reserves for future capital needs, which does indeed require a disciplined approach. And we want to use debt in a fiscally responsible manner and need for competitive property and user fees. As the mayor had indicated, our municipal services are a wide range of quality services for our citizens. All departments work together to deliver cost-effective programs and services that improve our community. So the various departments are the fire, police, corporate services, financial services, works and utility, and community services and community development. So this is sort of the milestones that we use when preparing the budget. We do actually commence quite early in the year, probably the latter part of July, first part of August. All of the senior staff receive the working papers to prepare for the next year's budget. And these are some of the guiding principles that we follow the strategic plan. We have various studies. The main ones are our long-term financial plan and asset management plan, which were last updated in 2016, and our water and wastewater plans, which were last updated in 2020. And again, council's priority, public input, and finally the budget approval, which we aim for as per our policy for the end of January. In an election year, we extend that an additional month to the end of February. And as noted here, the milestones within our strategic plan: housing, quality of life, transportation, waterfront development, tourism, and then town hall complex, our campus and square. So to date, we did post our budget guide at the mid-September and posted it for a couple of weeks in open forum for public input. October 25th was our first before council, and they provided some guidelines for our first draft, which was held November 22nd. And the application deadline for municipal grants was just closed as of yesterday. And in the first draft, we did put an envelope of 150,000, which is approximately 1% of taxation revenue. As noted, a few years back, we implemented a budget guide. And the reason for that is we hoped to help out residents understand how the town of Smith Falls operates and manages its finances, so that they can provide input to council on long-term financial planning and service delivery. Provide some basic information about the operations of the town and its budget principles, as well as relay some basic budget facts. We feel strongly that informed citizens are more engaged and more likely to participate in the budget process. And it's high-level reference for residents to use during these discussions and how the town determines and manages this budget. So with this budget, there has definitely been some expenditure challenges to maintain levels of service, taxpayers' expectations, legislations, and liabilities, continued demands to provide funding to outside agencies and groups, employee compensation, which are dictated by our collective agreements. The increase is approximately 483,000. Capital planning, our infrastructure deficit, yet the capital reserves in the first draft is decreased from last year of approximately 150,000. Asset management, there's some upcoming regulatory requirements. The first one, our first milestone being in July of next year, it's for our core services. Cost of construction, supplies and materials, the average CPI for 2021 increased slightly from the first draft. It's now at 3.9. October's CPI alone was 5.5%, and pressures on staff resources due to growth. And revenue challenges, insufficient reserve balances to meet those capital needs, potential increases to property tax rates, partially driven by transfers to capital reserve. And as the mayor had mentioned, potential increases to utility rates. The ultimate goal is to be self-sustaining, but we are still being subsidized by taxation to the tune of about 662,000. Unpredictable funding from other levels of government. And we ultimately want to ensure that user fees and tax rates remain regionally competitive. In the first draft, there was a slide that we did comparators of 9 other municipalities. And for taxes, we're about 6th place out of 10. For utility rates, it ranged from 5th to 8th, depending on the category. 5th, I believe it was for residential, and 8th it was for industrial. So action from the first draft. In the budget guideline meeting, council had directed staff to come forward with some scenarios. Status quo from last year, which was 1.1% increase. Projected tax rate increase as per our long-term plan, which was 3.38. Projected rate increase in our water financial plan, 5.5. The wastewater, 3.5. And the rate at the time for the average CPI was 3.8. None of those were considered by council and asked staff to come forward with some other scenarios. And those will be brought forward at 2.5, and 3% for their consideration at the next draft. When we brought forward the first draft, staff were asked to bring forward some deferrals on the next draft, because at that point we were at a shortfall for our tax support at capital reserve, about 2.8 million. As at the first draft, the expenditures, overall operation budget, the expenditures were about 26 million, transfers to capital reserve 2.2, and revenues to cover those costs was about 28.5 million. And of course, these are subject to change prior to the next draft, and the next draft will be presented on December 13th. Highlights of the capital reserve or the capital budget that was brought forward on the 22nd was the Beckwith Street reconstruction phase 2, which did receive pre-budget approval. New water tower, town hall renovations, town square, Wood Avenue storm sewers, that too was pre-approved, and a variety of other studies for a total of about 21 million. And again, the transfers to capital reserve about 2.2. And that is the end of my presentation, and the mayor will take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Janet. We'll get that off the screen. Okay, so very insightful. We see some people here on the Zoom who may want to ask a question. I think there's some questions that some were sent ahead of time. And maybe we can start with those questions. So I think the questions we did receive via email relate to Real and the use of the Real Deal store and outlet on William Street West. So does the town have plans to repair the roof of the building at 85 William Street? If not, how long do you plan on having us stay in it? Are there any other places you have in mind for us to use? And will electrical problems be repaired in 2022? So I assume Director Manhire, are you on here, or CA Morris? CEO Morris, would you like one of you two to?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I have had this conversation with some people at Real at this point, but yes, we do have a placeholder in the capital budget for work that was identified by an engineering assessment of the building that was recently conducted. And it's not imminent work, so we can certainly take a look at it over the next year or so and figure out the best strategy for how to support Real and the building condition itself. The electrical pieces are fairly straightforward and relatively inexpensive. The roof has a cost estimate between 350,000 and 660,000. Depending on what the construction finds when they open up the roof. The electrical work is significantly less. So yes, that can be done and will be done shortly. The roof itself is something that, as I said, can be deferred. It can be done this year as well if council chooses, but there is a placeholder in there with some explanations for council to consider.
Thank you. Does anyone from Real here have a follow-up question? I don't think I see any hands up.
Oh,
Barb,
yeah, sorry.
go ahead, Barb.
Sorry. So what's going to happen to the the agreement for the use of the building? Are we going to get an extension on that? Because that's sort of what we've been waiting for the past, 2 or 3 years now. Like what do you see happening with that? Or is that irrelevant to this conversation? Maybe.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Director Manhire.
There was an extension done last year, so we will extend that as council identifies its priorities for the coming year, and it can be done relatively quickly. So I will defer to the council having the discussion around how to proceed on it. But the agreement is there, and I would, I don't want to speak for council, but I would estimate that their support for REAL is not going to be in question in the least. So it's just deciding on the best approach for that support.
Well, thank you. And I think I speak on behalf of all of council when we indicate we are very supportive of REAL, and I'm very thankful for what you do for our community and our environment. And in this situation, I think we need to make sure that if we're making a significant investment in the replacement of that roof, that the rest of the building is in such condition that it justifies that kind of investment, because we know we have a long-term sustainable solution for REAL. We'll be waiting for the second draft of the budget to come forward, but presuming that the roof exists in that second draft, we'll have a broader discussion at that point in time. And I don't know if any member of council has any comments or questions to add to that at this stage, or we'll leave that for our December 13th budget meeting. So I think, Director Manhart, I think one thing we obviously would be interested in seeing is the overall condition report of the building, and if we're going to make an investment, to make sure that it's a good investment in a building that's going to be there to serve the needs of REAL and the community for many years to come.
Yes, I've forwarded the engineer's report to the board at REAL, and I can certainly do that with council as well.
Okay, thank you. Do we have additional questions from anybody who is? I see Adrian, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, I'm actually Daniel. I'm here with Adrian.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks. So yeah, we'd like to ask about we saw in the budget, we'd like to ask about the rationale of allocating 28.7%, or $5 million to police services. We understand it's aiming to solve a number of problems, but we're not making the connection on how it would solve the problems that are outlined in the 2022 public budget guide, which are the top items are housing and quality of life. And I also saw that the crime rate for property crime for adults in Smiths Falls has about doubled since the start of the pandemic. So I understand that that could be a reason for this. But on average, because on average cities spend 15 to 20% of the budget. So I understand that maybe this is a reactionary response to that. But yeah, we'd like to specifically ask if there's been a comparative analysis of alternative solutions to require this much to be allocated instead of other services that might solve the same problems in a better way.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. And I will start with a response there, and then perhaps I think Deputy Chief LaBelle is here as well, and he can probably add some further context. But what I can say as a member of the Police Service Board, that the Police Service Board has approved the budget that's been presented, and much of the cost attached to policing is really the people power, and the contract is tied to the OPP contract. So any wage increase would be following something that's been agreed to by the province for the Ontario Provincial Police. There is a little bit of capital work in the budget this year, like a new cruiser, as well as money towards the communication system. And Deputy Chief LaBelle can add more clarity there. But overall, having a smaller, dedicated municipal police service does have a cost to it. And in the past, the previous council had considered the possibility of seeking a costing on OPP, and that it was considered, was not followed through on. I can't speak on behalf of future councils. That's something they would consider. There is a possibility it may mean some savings, but it also would likely lead to a reduction in the dedicated officers who would be available at any moment in time within the community. So, but again, that is at the discretion of council. This council has not raised that question. Doesn't mean it can't happen at some point in time in the future. And Deputy Chief, are you able to provide a little bit further response here, please?
No, just to agree with what you said, Mr. Mayor. I mean, the large portion of our budget, and as you stated at the start of your presentation, you know, the police budget is a large portion of the municipal budget. It is every year. There's no you know, cause or increase that has substantially increased the value of that amount. You know, as you indicated, the budget, the majority of our budget is people. It's you know, the paying the salaries, wages, and the cost of operating the service itself. With regards to our capital expenditures for the upcoming year, it's the replacement of a cruiser. We do this every year. We have a fleet size that basically you know, requires that we replace the vehicle every year so that they don't become too long in service. As well, we have an upgrade to a phone system that's coming forward, and we're preparing for the implementation of the next generation of 911. So, but a large, you know, the greatest portion of our budget is basically operations and salaries for people and staffing.
Thank you. And what sorry, Treasurer Kuzil.
I just wanted to further add to that. Schedule 2 of our first draft is a consolidation of all the departmental. And in that, it shows the net change from 2021 to 2022. Police was 1.9, which I believe their payroll or their collective agreement was even higher than that. So I think they did well to keep it below the 2%. So it was about 94,000. And again, there's a schedule 4 that showed the variance, and there were very limited as far as any changes aside from increases to payroll. If anything, they had a fuel costs went down a bit. The security grant, which is outside of their control, went down a bit. So the majority of it was payroll related. So I just wanted to provide that context.
Thank you. And as a member of the Police Service Board, along with Councillor McGuire, I'm confident that it is a lean budget. That there really is no surplus within that. And to Deputy Chief LaBelle's comments, it's really a matter of paying for the people power and the police service we have. And one of the challenges, of course, we face, like in many organizations, is people who will be off work from time to time. And so it's a matter of ensuring that there are sufficient people power, police power to fulfill the shifts in the manner needed. And we have platoons to ensure that we have the adequate and effective policing at all times. So I don't think there is really room within the police budget to lower that cost. I think overall, if it was a decision by a council in the future to consider OPP costing, that would have to be something that would be discussed and probably something that would be broadly discussed throughout the community as well. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I don't want to, I mean, it's a very touchy subject, I know, and it's a huge portion of the budget, and we've talked about it many, many times. And Daniel, I think that your question is well taken, but the other factor, and Deputy Chief, you can confirm this, but part of this is the need, the provincial regulation to have a certain amount of officers dedicated as per calls per service, I mean, calls for the population. So we've maintained that. The other advantage that we have is that we have a local board, local police services board that sit. We have 2 councillors on it. There's members of the community on it, and so with the OPP, it's more of a top-down approach, in my view. And you know, I think that we're well served with our police services, albeit it is not cheap. But I agree with your comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Daniel?
Hi, it's actually Adrienne this time. I had a
Okay, it's
they
confusing
were
me tonight.
next to each other.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question that we really wanted to ask was like whether there's been a comparative analysis, because we're not trying to say that policing is not a solution to the housing, the problems that were outlined in the strategy. It's more, is it the best solution considering how much money it's being allocated? For example, in our research, we found that providing affordable housing has a lot of impact on improving, obviously, housing and quality of life for residents. And we haven't been able to find or come across similar research that suggests that policing reduces crime at the rate that affordable housing can. So we're kind of curious what kind of background work has been done to justify this proportion of the budget being allocated here.
Okay, Adrian, thank you for your question. And I will start with my perspective on this. And for housing, affordable housing is our top strategic priority. And we do have a housing advisory committee that has been working pretty hard at trying to bring forward solutions to help encourage the development of more affordable housing in our community. We do have one project which will be probably underway in the next couple of months. But that said, we know that it is a drop in the bucket, and this is a incredible challenge. And we recognize that there are many people in our community who are very housing insecure, are paying far more for housing today than they can afford. And we recognize that the problems that can expand from there are have a deep and lasting impact on our community. When it comes to alternatives, the alternative would be an OPP costing. And I said that the previous council had initially decided to seek an OPP costing, but the OPP at the time were also going through a new methodology in determining their costing models, to my recollection. And council ultimately decided to not follow through. And essentially, this council or another council could seek a costing from the OPP. It would be a fairly lengthy process. It would take a number of months to pull it together. And we would get a cost that would show us the base cost for each household, as well as additional costs based on the additional effort needed, basically the calls for service that would be required. And to my knowledge and my recollection, while it could mean and probably would mean a reduction in cost, it would also mean that it's more of a collaborative approach, but it would also be a shared service with our neighbors. So in other words, if there was a detachment, OPP detachment here, there would nothing, cars could leave our community to head to Montague or Rideau Lakes or from North Elmsley from time to time. So it would mean probably a difference in the level of service. I guess it would still have to be adequate and effective policing. But again, this council has not had this up for discussion, and doesn't mean it won't happen at some point in time in the future. Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Worship. And perhaps for the benefit of Adrian and others, just to add to what the mayor and the deputy chief has said about about policing. With regard to affordable housing, that's not actually within the mandate of the municipality. We have been able to have a task force and make recommendations, and the municipality is capable of changing bylaws or some way through community benefits, incenting developers to build affordable housing. Certainly our own mayor has done a lot of work on that to try and our planning staff to get that affordable housing piece into new developments. But in terms of being a landlord or purchasing land or doing things like that, that is not within the municipal mandate to provide housing. If I understood what Adrian said, there would be no opportunity to take money out of the police and put it into affordable housing. I hope that sort of clarifies anybody who's confused about what the mandate of the municipality is.
Thank you. If any other members of staff or council wish to comment on that, if not, we will certainly move on to additional questions. Director Costello, do we have any questions from the Facebook Live? And
I don't see any, Mayor Panko. I don't know if Director Costello can hear you, but I don't see any on the Facebook page. I'm just checking the comments, refreshing every so often, and there's been nothing put in.
nothing in the chat.
No, I don't see any comments here.
We've got a quiet crowd tonight. And of course, all of our staff are here to be prepared to discuss any of the key budget items. Director Manhire, I assume you're still here. Since council added its support to continue on with phase 3, I'm going to turn to you to just speak a little bit to the developments Monday night and the steps forward on the phase 3 redevelopment of municipal complex.
So the architects are finalizing the plans at this point. We have gone through the IT requirements and the quote from the IT department, or from the consultant that developed that plan. We have value engineered that down a little bit. There will be a report coming to council for, I believe, next week, just to lay out what that looks like and how it might be funded. And then council can decide from there. So at this point, we are in the final stages of receiving our permits, of finalizing the plans, and of having the tender document ready to go for when council decides to move ahead with the project.
Okay. And timeline for construction and expected completion date?
They're estimating between 6 and 8 months for the project, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at trying to start that process as soon as possible, just to have the completion date before the end of summer next year. And
can you speak to some of the primary reasons why we've committed thus far to this project, and assuming we proceed with it? What are the benefits it brings to the community?
The town hall at this point is not accessible to the community, which is a challenge in a historic building. We do have a plan that the plan that we've developed at this point provides access through an elevator, as well as refines that space. It provides a greater space for the public to be engaged in the council process and town business. So it's an updated version of our facility, and our facility has not been renovated, hadn't been renovated for quite a number of years. So we're dealing with fairly old infrastructure at this point that required a significant amount of work. There's and I don't have on the top of my head the amount to reinforce the structure and the building in order to to get some of the issues of the ages to be resolved. But there's quite a number of those as well. So this brings the entire building up to code, as well as accessibility code, provides us with the IT requirements that will bring us into the future as well. So allowing council to have options for not only in-person meetings, but also to engage with the public through electronic means as well, and for people to get involved in that process in a number of different ways. So it modernizes our delivery of that service significantly, as well as provides space for staffing. Our building at Town Hall, one of the drivers behind that process was actually to improve the energy efficiency of that space. Before we started renovating Town Hall, it would cost us on average about $69,000 a year for hydro and heat. And our peak demand for the building was about 67 kilowatts. Since doing phase 2, we've managed to cut that down significantly. And our peak demand that we've noticed along the way here is only at 31 kilowatts. So that should cut our overhead, but it also makes the building more efficient and effective for staff as well as the public.
And that's before phase 3.
That's before phase 3. That's correct. Yeah. So we're dealing right now, just so the public is aware, we're dealing with a building that was built in the mid 1800s. There have been some renovations done on the building, obviously, but this one is going to help in terms of energy efficiency for the building, as well as for flow and just the overall feel of the council chambers, as well as the service offices that are on the main floor.
Well, we all recognize how critically important it is that we, even as a municipality, as a corporation, do our part to mitigate and reduce our carbon footprint. And obviously, it's our buildings are, I think, our biggest consumers of energy. And so making changes here does help in our commitment to do our small part in a much bigger problem.
And this actually goes along, if I may, Mr. Chair, that we did an energy, a Honeywell energy audit of buildings and did energy efficiency renovations to a number of our buildings. We've reduced our carbon footprint by 140 tons. The work at Town Hall is in addition to that. So we are making inroads in terms of not only being more energy efficient and cost efficient, but also in being more green in our approach.
Thank you. And Dr. Maynard, while I've got you on the spot, can you speak to some of your capital projects that are currently in the budget for 2022?
We just have a couple of pieces that are in there. So we've got a Parks and Rec master plan that's coming forward to council before the end of the year for some more debate and hopefully gets adopted. That Parks and Rec master plan indicates a number of different priorities for the community in terms of developing the infrastructure that creates quality of life for people in the community. So we're looking at doing some playground renovations and playground equipment replacements this year, as well as for subsequent years. The Parks and Rec master plan will speak to the priorities for that. And it also gives us an opportunity to take a look at how we're serving different communities, and different communities over the years have evolved a little bit. So we'll be able to reach out to communities and have their park areas and playgrounds more relevant to their current uses. So we're looking at doing that as well. There are a couple of vehicular replacements that were deferred over past years. So we need there's a plow truck for the arena to clear the snow, that kind of thing. The capital budget for the town square and town hall are both part of community services as well. So and as well as the issues identified through the engineering assessment for real. So we are looking forward to that discussion as well, and how to best serve that purpose in the community and keep it doing what it's doing, which is help us with waste diversion as well as just providing a reuse option.
Thank you. Treasurer Quazile, I'm just going to turn to you. If you can just explain the role that grant funding is contributing to our 2022 budget, both the application-based successes that we've had, as well as the other grants that we tend to see on a regular basis, formula-based. And then Director McMahon, I'll turn to you in a moment just to talk about some of the projects under your departments.
Certainly. So thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do receive what's called an Osif formula-based funding. So last year's allocation was 605,000. The ministry recently announced that envelope is being doubled. Unfortunately, we have not received the announcement as of yet. I did reach out to my ministry contact and they indicated it would probably be a couple more weeks. I'm hoping it's in time for the second draft. Potentially it may not be, but that is my hope. We did receive so the other thing that's on here is a pending Canada infrastructure program for the water tower. That grant is 3.67. If we are successful with that, we'll proceed with the water tower project beginning next year. If not, that will be deferred because in the forecast, it was extended a bit further down the road. The balance of that is to be covered by long-term financing anyway, so we would just defer taking that loan out. So we have a few other things on Ccrf funding, which is for the Beckwith Street, a regular federal gas. Those funds are being used for the Beckwith Street, for the majority used for the Beckwith Street project. Just hoping I haven't missed anything here.
The connecting link.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. So the connecting link funding is 1.9 million. And that again is Beckwith Street Phase 2. And I think that covers it, most of it.
Yeah, is there a little bit of ISIP?
Sorry, there is a small portion for that for our for the town square, and I believe it's 100 and I'm just trying to find it here.
It's 175,000.
Yes.
So that's, I think, great work by staff to apply for and successfully obtain numerous grants, which help reduce our capital costs and ultimately reduce the budget dollars we need to draw from our taxpayers. Director McMahon, can you speak to some of the projects you have scheduled for 2022?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chair. Are you referring to utility projects or public works related projects?
Both. Yeah, both, please.
Okay, so for public works related projects, really the only thing that we have on the books would be the allocation of funds towards Beckwith Street Phase 2 for major capital projects. As you know, that project is going to be an expensive project, so we felt it not prudent to apply or to budget for any additional street reconstructions or any large scale road projects for 2022. Well, I guess we'll have our hands full with Beckwith Street, so that is a reality there. We do have a couple or vehicle replacement within the water distribution Department of Public Works. I believe it's a 2009, if I'm not mistaken, pickup truck that is in our capital replacement program for replacement. So that vehicle is coming up to be 13 years old, and albeit we don't have a formalized fleet management replacement strategy, the premise is that is in fact 13 years old and it's starting to, I guess, be a bit of a burden when it comes to maintenance on an annual basis. So pickup trucks are a little bit, in the operations that we do on a daily basis, driving around town, it's not like they're running up and down the highway. So the vehicles do have a lot of hours on them, albeit they may not be high in kilometers. It's important to understand that these are work trucks. They're not our own personal vehicles or daily drivers, if you will. So they do get beat up pretty good. And it comes a point where it gets, I guess, cost prohibitive to keep them on the road based on the maintenance costs to keep them operating. So that's why that piece of equipment is in there. And with respect to utilities, I do have Jason Barlow, our manager of water wastewater, on the line as well. So he can probably speak to some of the projects within utilities and articulate them a lot better than I could. So if it's just the same to you, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll defer to Jason on some of those projects.
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Good
Jason.
evening. We'll start with the water treatment plant. And there's quite a few smaller items on our capital list this year. A lot of it has to do with rebuilds and maintenance that's required on our pumping systems, right from the low lift to our high lift. So right from the beginning of the plant to the end. The plant is now just over 10 years old. So some of our analyzers are requiring upgrades. Usually they're a 5 to 7 year lifespan, but we've been able to extend these. So we're starting with our long-term financial plan to make these replacements before we do end up with failures that could put us at risk. There is some cleanings involved. If your ministry recommends that you clean storage facilities approximately every 5 years, we have not yet cleaned the reservoirs here at the water treatment facility. So there is money, I think it was $21,000 put in place to have the reservoir cells cleaned and inspected to meet that standard that the ministry requires, as well as our it's a BET tank. So it's our backwash equalization tank. So that's where when we backwash the filters, all that waste and the solids go into this tank, and we settle out the solids, send that to the sewer system, to the wastewater plant, and the supernate goes back to the river. So that tank, there's a lot of buildup in that tank, and that needs to be taken down, cleaned, and inspected as well.
Thank you.
I'll move to, do you have any questions on the water side, or just want to move to the wastewater side?
I'll see if anybody has any questions. I don't think so. Okay, continue on, please.
Okay, and the wastewater side, we have the carryover for the big PLC project at the wastewater plant to remove the old Bristol and upgrade that with newer equipment. So that's going to be the first part of the year. We also have our bar screen project, the screens at our headworks. So all the wastewater that's pumped up from the wet well in the system is pumped through these screens, and we take out the larger debris. And those screens are old and beyond repair. It's not feasible to make the repairs. It would cost as much as purchasing the new screens. So that project was put forward. It was deferred from 2021 because of the PLC project. So we were hoping to have that accomplished in the next budget to be able to ensure that we do screen out the debris, so we don't have problems with our sludge pumps or other pumps in the system that could get plugged up if stuff does get through. Annually, we rebuild the sewage lift pumps. As you're aware, this year we had a couple pumps fail, so we had to do emergency rebuilds on those. It's just the solids that go through. There's a lot of parts that wear, so we need to make sure we keep up and keep those pumps in good shape, so we don't have to spend the total cost for replacement, which was up to $130,000 for replacement. So it's good money to spend to do the maintenance that's required to do the rebuilds on those pumps. We have in here some monies for isolation tanks. So with our system, we have primary settling tanks, and then we have secondary clarifiers as well. With these, you have old slide gates that are used to stop the flow. Currently, it takes operations a few days to secure these so that there's no leaks, so that we can actually get in and do the work. So doing an upgrade on that would help alleviate operational time to be able to satisfy the requirements to be able to work and do maintenance and stuff inside these tanks that we have. So it's a multi-year project to start with our secondary tanks and then move to also the primary, because all those slide gates are in the same shape and they need to be refurbished and brought up to a better standard. And we have chemical feed pumps. So with our coagulant change in 2019, Our chemical feed pumps that are on site are oversized. So right now we have them set to the minimum flow that we can. And we're unable to actually optimize our coagulant because we require a pump that will go a little bit lower so that we can be more efficient. So that's the money in there, is to actually have, there's 4 chemical feed pumps. So this would be 2 feed pumps that would actually be able to accommodate a lower flow and a lower dosage. So we could actually be more efficient with our chemical usage that's required at the plant. And that's an overview of water, wastewater.
Lots going on. And I guess the key message here is that these are complex systems that require ongoing capital maintenance and improvements in order to make sure we're operating as efficiently. And obviously these are systems that run every moment of every day.
That's
and
correct.
our citizens relying on that. Wendy?
Thanks, Your Worship. I wonder if it might be of interest to those watching if Jason could make some comment with regard to the construction project to separate our sewer and our water and wastewater storm sewers, what difference that has made in phase 1 and what we could anticipate how much more that could bring to the table in phase 2. When we started council, we were shocked at I think we called it the unreported water, something like that. And that's made a big difference. So that may be of interest and highlight the importance of finishing that work in phase 2.
Yeah, I can touch base on that. Like with the Beckwith phase 1 of the project, once we finally switched over to the new system, there was a noticeable difference in the flow, both out of the water plant and into the wastewater facility. So making sure that we do target those combined sewers in the north end is something that makes our systems more sustainable over the long term. Paul, I don't know if you want to go a little further into George Street and those areas are also on our radar for that reason. But to continue on with the non-revenue water before that, we have over the last year really reduced our pumpage from our treatment facility at the water plant, where we are looking to be about 400,000 cubic meters less water pumped this year than last year. So that's a considerable amount of water. So there is considerable savings in electrical, chemical costs at the facility. So the benefits are seen through that. And I'm hoping in the new year to bring another report forward for non-revenue water to highlight those efficiencies and those changes and kind of where we're going to make our next step moving forward. But yeah, we saw noticeable differences on both ends with the phase 1 of Beckwith Street. We'll probably should notice another benefit with phase 2, and then further on, if Paul wants to discuss the George Street design at all.
Yeah, you could, Paul, just knowing that I tuned in for that last night. It was a great discussion. So yeah, please carry on.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for participating. And Councillor Brennan was on the call last night too, so I'd certainly appreciate Council's participation. Yeah, so with respect to what Jason was talking about, with we pretty well everything north of the river here in Smith Falls is original pipes, if you will, that are in the ground, both water and our combined sewer system, which is, as you know, it's a one pipe system that does collect wastewater and stormwater from streets. So, I mean, that was a system of the day back in, the turn of the century or shortly thereafter. And
it was the turn of the previous century.
Yeah, but I know the big push from the MECP, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, to focus on sewer separation in municipalities, much like Smith Falls. So like I said, we have our work cut out for you for quite a number of years ahead of all of us to address areas specifically north of the river here in town. And like Jason said, it's a bit of a how they correlate together is we have water distribution system throughout town that we know we have a number of leaks, and that's just a reality on old water systems. It happens. And so that accounts for having to treat that water, the unaccounted water, like Jason's mentioning, coming out of the distribution plant or the treatment plant. And then the spinoff from that is we have sanitary collection and storm mains in the ground that are leaky as well. I won't say leaky, but they have cracks in them that allow water infiltration into those pipes. And then we have to treat that same water that we're losing out of our distribution system in our collection system. So all that to say, once we get through Beckwith Street and we look towards George Street reconstruction in 2024, I would recommend that or let me back up. I think it's important for this group and anybody on the call to understand that the focus from the municipality, as it is with any other municipality, is to focus on one of the core municipal services being our sewer and water pipes that are in the ground that are old. It's very important from a health perspective and from an environment perspective that we continue to replace those mains at the opportune time. And I think we're seeing that the opportune time for Smith Falls is now and in the future going forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And it was great to see progress on George Street. And again, going back to our previous comments and Director Manheimer's comments about reducing our carbon footprint at our municipal complex. But again, these efficiencies help reduce the amount of energy we need to consume at both water treatment and wastewater treatment as we move forward. So again, it's a very responsible action. I'll give other managers and directors an opportunity just to speak to a couple of the maybe the projects that they have scheduled for 2022. And Director Costello, I think there's a few things under your portfolio. Some the pre-budget approval, of course, for affordable housing CIP. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, or Carl, if you were here to speak to that.
Certainly. I don't think Carl's on the call. So
Okay.
Council recall that we received pre-budget approval a couple of weeks ago to move forward with an affordable housing CIP. And we've combined that in with updating and refreshing our current downtown and waterfront master CIP program. So we're at the stage right now. It'll be advertised next week. It'll be going in an RFP. And we're looking, that's a recommendation, I think, as you may all recall, that came out of the Housing Task Force in late 2020. So we're looking at doing that. We got $50,000 pre-budget approval to do that. And as Janet alluded to, most of the corporate services capital items are study related. One that falls within corporate services, Municipal Heritage Committee, they've also, there's also 120,000 put forward there for the Heritage District study. Council provided their support for that many months ago now, maybe 3 months ago. So that has been incorporated into the budget. And as well, a carryover was the OP and the secondary plan, which with $70,000, we've increased that to 90. We've combined those two. So those are the three main items within corporate. There's probably going to be a small increase operationally in bylaw enforcement. So that's parking, animal control, simply because now we've brought our officers in-house and we obviously are going to have to purchase some equipment that normally with a contract service we didn't have to. So there's a small increase there. But for the most part, those are the three main areas where we've had to put monies aside for in the capital budget.
Sure. Before I let you go, if you just maybe add a little bit more context to the secondary plan and OP review. Just OP stands for official plan. I guess we get used to the acronyms that we live with every day, but for the public who may be watching, just to explain what that project's all about.
Sure, I'll do my best. It's not my primary area of expertise either, but as council can recall, we have to update our official plan. And we're looking at two areas specifically, Lawrence Street as well as Lombard Street, to dive more into detail on those areas and providing more specific details on that area. So we've allocated an additional $20,000 to do that. That's kind of taking all my expertise in that area to explain it, Sean, but diving into those areas more specifically to look at what the future holds for those two areas. And again, it's Lombard and Lorne. Yes,
great. Thank you. And Julia, do you have a moment to talk about a couple of things you've got underway or currently this stage for next year, especially website?
Everyone. Yep. There's a few capital budget items that we're proposing for 2022. The new website is one of them. We have some operational budget items as well. We're looking at funding for supporting the cultural plan, which was approved by council this year. Most of our budget isn't really changing. We're looking at a communications officer as well, so some additional staffing in order to support the implementation of a new website. So those are the biggest increases that are happening with economic development.
Okay, thank you. And Art, I'm going to go back to you just to talk a little bit about the library, because this has been on the capital budget for a couple of years now, and I see it's back in there for 2022.
Yes, Your Worship, there was a couple of issues with the building identified over the last couple of years, and with the COVID and the change in leadership, it's just been extended to the following year.
So explain what those works are.
If I recall, there's replacing of eaves troughs and some of the trim around the building. And this is in anticipation because there is a plan that has been in the works for an extended period by the board at the library to renovate the library. I believe that they've got a pretty fulsome plan. They do have some funding behind it, and they have some applications in for funding for the rest of that project. So this is just interim pieces that would be done to prevent any further damage at the building.
And specifically, that's for the children's library. I believe the third floor, is that?
That's correct. Yeah. So they have a plan to renovate that third floor as well as some of the rest of the building, provide more accessibility, and upgrade the insulation and some of the features in the building that are a bit of a user challenge right now, just because it doesn't create a comfortable environment. So
it's a very critical work.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Chief Cheeseborough, I think you're the only one who has had the opportunity yet to speak to the capital plans for the fire department for next year.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Our capital plan for 2022 has been downsized slightly from what we were proposing at the start of the budget process. We do have two items that we've incorporated for proposal this year. One is the protective equipment, protective clothing for the firefighters. We will be replacing some of the volunteer firefighters who have resigned or have left. And the other significant amount is for a new radio system. We put in $500,000 for a new radio system. The fire department, when it acquired the radio system, long before my time, it was a used piece of equipment. It has seen some significant problems and issues with the current radio system. It is the mainstream revenue generating for the fire department that has a significant impact on our budget. We've had an appraisal done, an assessment done on the system earlier this year. We've also went through the County of Lanark communication system, why they conducted their assessment of the Lanark County infrastructure. We've got a report back from the province of Ontario with regards to the FleetNet system that we were anxiously waiting on. And we've got a further report back from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network to determine exactly what's going on with that. This budget line item is certainly significant, but it is a long-term investment for this project. And it also incorporates the next generation 911 system that we had been putting money away for the last 2 years. So that is also incorporated into this proposal. Further, this allows the fire department and the communications center to take on additional contracts, which each year we get numerous questions and concerns from other fire departments looking for dispatching service. But this system that's in place at the present time is at its maximum and cannot be expanded. So there's potential in additional clients being brought on, and there's additional potential with regards to revenue that this could generate. And as we know, it's a critical piece of equipment that must be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's heavily relied on by the 14 departments that we currently dispatch for.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, it is something that is a critical piece of infrastructure. It is supporting 14 departments that we dispatch for, including our own and across all of Lanark County. And it's something that obviously has to be up to date, has to be foolproof, fail-proof in order to make sure that's providing the service that we've committed to. And overall, is there around $400,000 a year of dispatch revenue that we receive to help offset the cost of a fire department?
We're currently just under the $400,000 mark for revenue generating. We do have two other revenue streams that we've established and developed that also go towards offsetting capital items. And certainly we're in a position at this point in time, our negotiations will be starting in 2022, 2023 with regards to our dispatching contracts that have now been updated over the last 5 years, as well as Lanark County contract that we're discussing, and our automatic aid contracts have come due that we will be discussing. CAO Morris and myself have initiated preliminary discussions with one of our automatic aided partners, and that's ongoing, and we're quite hopeful that we'll have those to bring back council in early January or February.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions from the public, from members of the leadership team or council? Okay, CAO Morris, I guess you haven't had an opportunity to speak tonight, but if you can just sort of discuss the path forward for budget purposes.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chair. So perhaps I can start with looking holistically. We've had a really good description of departmental needs, and I just want to pick up on a comment that was made at the first budget meeting. And rightfully so. The observation is that it's a $20 million, over $20 million capital ask. It's huge. There are reasons for that. We have a number of big strategic priority projects in this budget. We've talked extensively about Beckwith Phase 2, Town Hall Phase 3. We have the water tower takes up an enormous amount of space in the budget. Between the water tower and the new piping infrastructure to service the tower, that project alone is well over $8 million. It's a big project, and we have to bear in mind the water tower that we use right now was built in the late 1920s, before the Great Depression, if that gives you some context. It's not going to last a considerable amount of time, so we really need to focus on preparing to build this water tower. The primary focus in 2022 will be to finalize the design, the detailed final design that has yet to be done. And hopefully, as Janet mentioned, if the funding comes through that we've applied for $5 million in funding, we can start to upgrade the infrastructure. It takes large pipes to feed a water tower, both the water going in and of course the water coming out. So that's a rather large project. So I think it's important to note, even though we have, I think it's about 8.2 million in the budget, we won't spend 8.2 million in 2022. We need to get a bunch of things in order, but we flagged it as that's the total cost of the project that we need to fund over the next couple of years. So we're going to be looking at that in draft 2 and identifying how we can be very specific about how much we're going to spend in 2022. Some of the other ones that I'd like to mention, the Wood Avenue storm sewers, that's something that I think we all knew was coming at some point, but it's here. The work is largely finished, at least the underground work is finished. That's a $600,000 project that again takes up a lot of space in the budget. So in summary, what I would say is that we're really focusing on those large strategic priorities. And that's why we ended up with such a large budget. While we're looking at those big ticket items, we also have to replace things like a bar screen in the wastewater treatment plant. That's a $550,000 item. These are not inexpensive items. And so, you know, we get questions about water and sewer rates, and they're set as they are because it's very expensive to run a water and a wastewater treatment plant. We're fortunate we have a relatively new water treatment plant, and Jason told us a little bit about what he's doing there. Some really great innovative stuff, certainly with the unaccounted water. That's, you know, in terms of becoming more efficient, that's where our focus needs to be. And Jason has been, you know, has a laser focus on improving that. So that's going to lower our operating costs in the future. But we do have ongoing repair and replacement of equipment that isn't off the shelf. We don't buy this stuff at Home Hardware. It's very expensive. And I just want to reinforce that in order to run an efficient operation, we need the right equipment to do it. And the 2022 capital budget is all about accomplishing those big projects and maintaining what we have so we can be as efficient and keep our operating costs at a manageable level. So at this point, council has given us direction to come back with 3 different scenarios, lowest being 2%, I think the highest being 4%. That's what we're working on presently. We will have the figures ready for the 13th of December when we introduce the second draft, and we'll be looking for direction that evening or shortly after to inform what we hope will be the final draft. I believe it's the 17th of January. So we still have a lot of work to do, and we'll need council's direction and certainly direction from the public to understand what's important. But what I can say is that everything in the budget either advances a strategic priority or supports a critical asset that we have in our inventory to run the town of Smith Falls. And I would like to add that, you know, some of the growth pressures we're seeing, especially in the southwest end of town, you know, we have planning applications in various stages to add up to 800 to up to 1,000 people in that section of town alone. That creates demands on our infrastructure. That means we need to plow more roads, we need to pick up more recyclables and more garbage. At some point, we need to deal with organic waste in our waste stream. That to me is kind of the final frontier in waste management. We do have a small allocation in this budget for a pilot project to look at in-house countertop type of composters. We'd like to trial them to see if that could be part of our solution to wet waste, as it's known. It makes up to 33% of the waste stream. So we need to make some inroads in terms of wet waste. And we have a modest $15,000 ask to do some research and trial a program to see if that can be a long-term affordable way to manage organic waste that our residents produce. So I can say this budget covers a broad spectrum of activities and services, and it's going to get us to the finish line in terms of the strategic priorities that this council set early in the term of council.
Great, thank you very much. And so the challenge that, of course, council faces is balancing the needs of the municipality, both today and into the future. And to the water tower's point, I mean, a water tower that is 100 years old might have met the needs of the community then, and while it's aged today, it's also insufficient. I think it probably provides 30% of the water storage that ideally we should have as a municipality. And so it leaves us vulnerable if we have a major leak, which we had one a couple of years ago when a major water main was broken. That water tower drains very quickly. And so it's important to make sure we have adequate storage for both our consumer needs as well as fire suppression. So it's all part of a growing community. But councils will deliberate, obviously. For Councillor Allen and Brennan and I, this is our 12th budget. We approach each one, I think, and feel free to speak up, Lorraine or Jay, with, I guess, great enthusiasm, but also very conscious that the dollars that support this budget come from the taxpayers of our town. And I'm proud to say that Over the last, I think, 8 years anyway, maybe longer, we've delivered budgets which have on average have come in at or under the rate of inflation. And I think part of that is the efficiencies that we found through a service sustainability review that saved quite a bit of money, and great work from staff in completing that. But at the same time, being very conscious that we need to make sure we maintain the assets the municipality owns today, as well as prepare and plan for the future. And we are a growing community, as CEO Morris indicated, and the demands and burdens on this town will be greater every year we go forward. We're fortunate that we have growth, and speaking to the work on Wood Avenue, the sewer work we are committing to there with $600,000 enables the Wood Avenue subdivision to move ahead. And about 150 homes there at some point in time will likely be paying somewhere between $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 a year in property taxes towards the town. So it's that growth which enables us. So it's the decisions we make to enable growth to happen that helps create the long-term sustainability of the community. And of course, all the housing happening right now is contributing to our bottom line. If I'm not mistaken, I think our growth this year amounted to about 1.9 or 2.9% addition to our tax revenue, Treasurer Kuzil.
So to confirm, it was approximately 1.9, additional revenue about 338,000. The long-term plan projected a very steady kind of 1% per year. So we're definitely higher than, part of that was a delay in getting some of the new assessments in because of the pandemic. So we're still kind of feeling some of that. There's a backlog for sure.
Thank you. But we're fortunate with that growth. It enables us to deliver what we need to do while mitigating the impact on our current taxpayers. So with that, I'll ask for any further final comment before we wrap up. I don't see any hands. I don't see anything in the chat. I assume there's nothing on Facebook coming through. I guess technically, I don't think we have a motion for adjournment here. I think we're simply adjourning our meeting. So with that, thank you everyone for your attendance and participation tonight. Also, for anybody who is watching now or afterwards, feel free to reach out to any member of council. You can email any one of us at the town or call us to share your thoughts as we prepare for our next budget meeting on December 13th. Thanks everyone for participating.